thanks very much, Deepak, for the opportunity to be here. I'm really thrilled to be here for a lot of reasons. But one reason is that it's been a great meeting. I've learned a lot. But I came here with some really high hopes because when I was running for president, I had a conversation with an astronaut, and he asked me, did I support the space program? I said, I certainly do. And we began to talk about science and things like this. And some members of the press overheard me say that I hoped that someday that mankind would discover a means to travel faster than the speed of light. And this got picked up in the press, and it caused quite a stir. And I came here, Deepak, hoping that with all these physicists that some of you would at least help me fulfill my dream that we're going to find a way to travel faster than the speed of light. It hasn't come up yet, but there's still another panel, right? So we may get it. Instead, what I got was from Rudy's first speech, I got really worried because I've been seized with the problems that have been given us in mind-body relationships and quantum mechanics and how the cosmic consciousness, and I worried a lot that I might depress my delta wave. And I just want you to know it was really depressed last night as I was working through all this. But hopefully we're going to come out of this the right way. I'm here to talk about leadership today. And you know, there's probably more books written on leadership than any other subject. And the only way I can talk about it is personally. And I want to talk a little about the spiritual dimension and the emotional dimensions of leadership. And so I want to talk a little about the military side of it, a little about the political side, and then a little about where I see us going. But we're in a very, very challenging environment right now. Of course, we've passed the Cold War. We've moved into the stage where America is no longer the unchallengeable, far as the eye can see, hegemonic leader, sole superpower in the world. It's going to be a lot more complicated than that. And we have a lot of immediate challenges on our plate. Osama bin Laden's gone, and he'll soon, no doubt, be forgotten. But the problem of terrorism is still very much with us. And we're devoting a lot of resources to it, not only here in the United States, but around the world. Today, our hearts go out to the men and women and children in Syria. And they're suffering tremendous losses. It's a tremendous humanitarian tragedy. And something has to be done. No one's quite figured out how to resolve this issue. And behind Syria, there's the deeper challenge of Iran's potential of acquiring nuclear weapons and what that might mean to the world, and what actions might have to be taken if Iran continues to go after nuclear weapons as it seems to be doing. And there's North Korea, which has nuclear weapons and is jogging from left to right and up and down and at one point threatening, at another point conciliating, but always holding the nuclear card. It's a problem. And beyond these security challenges in the conventional sense, there are much deeper challenges of environmental degradation and climate change and global warming. And still 2 billion people who are living on less than $1 a day, who need to be brought into the developing world and given opportunities like we enjoy in the United States and in other developed countries. Can we actually handle these problems? And so I was very happy to come here and hear this discussion, Deepak, because I think the dimension, the spiritual dimension, the way you're trying to unite science with thought and creativity and humanism and spirituality, consciousness, these are really important directions for us to consider today. It's a lot about leadership. So I went to West Point. I was 17 years old. I wanted public service. I wanted to be in the United States Army. I thought that was the right way to serve because we were under the challenge of the Cold War, and we knew that the Soviet Union was there. And Nikita Khrushchev had come to a farm in Iowa when I was 14 years old. I wasn't at the farm, but it was all over the news. He'd said that the Soviet Union would bury America. Then he'd gone to the United Nations and he'd taken off his shoe and he'd pounded on the lectern to emphasize that the Soviet Union was the new top dog. And we knew what that meant, or at least we thought we knew what that meant. And people my age we were part of the generation that, we were part of the movie October Sky. When Sputnik was launched, my friends and I went out to build rockets to try to help America. We went to the drugstore, we bought potassium nitrate, we mixed up rocket fuel, we burned our hands and caused a mess, but we tried to protect this country, and so I wanted to continue that. I went into the military. I found myself in 1970 leading an infantry company in Vietnam, and I was out with a platoon on patrol. The mission was to keep the enemy away from Saigon and to find the enemy out there in these base camps and push them back, identify them, bring firepower to bear on them. We were just south of so-called War Zone D, and I was out with 20 men, and I was about number 4 in column. We crossed a little footbridge. It was beautifully crafted bamboo over a crystal clear, sparkling stream. And the man in front of me turned and he said, "Sir, the path's gone." We'd been walking on a path that was maybe 15 feet wide, hard-packed sand, dry season in Vietnam, through the jungle, and suddenly there was no path. He said, "It's gone." I said, "It can't be." I had a map in my pocket. I had a compass in my left hand. My M16 was in my right hand, and I moved forward up, and I looked down through the trees, and sure enough, I couldn't see a path. And I turned, and just as I turned, I heard these hornets were buzzing, buzz, 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 around my head, and I felt my rifle fall out of my hand. And when you're an infantryman, you don't drop your rifle, especially if it's an M16, because you're going to clean it before you fire it. And I looked down, and I saw on my hand a white speck of something, and I realized that buzzing wasn't the hornet nest of Fort Benning, Georgia. It was, and I said to the guy next to me, I said, "I've been shot." And I reached to pick up my rifle, and he bumped me and kept me from getting the rifle. I scrambled back, and the bullets were flying, and there were 3 of us up front, 4 of us up front. A couple of guys laid down in front of me. They still had their weapons. I had no weapon at this point. I'd been hit by 4 rounds, 1 in the hand, 1 in the shoulder, 1 in the leg, and then as I was crawling away, I guess a guy nicked me in the behind. But I got back, and behind these guys, the bullets are flying, and I saw the guy in front of me take a round, and another one crease his shirt, and I looked to the right. There was nobody on the right, just jungle. And I looked to the left, and there was nobody on the left, just jungle. And I could see about 15 feet to the front. And I had the other 15 men I was with back behind, and I hollered, and I really hollered, "Get the machine gun up. Get up here, now." These were men who were Vietnam War. They were draftees. They didn't go to Canada. They didn't drop out, but they had peace symbols on their helmets. They didn't want to be there. Maybe 1 or 2 of them had college degrees. Most of them hadn't finished high school. They were from California and Utah and Florida and New York. They didn't know each other. They were rotated in and out individually. They didn't want to be there. Most of them had never actually been in a firefight. I said, "Get the machine gun up here." I was laying flat on my stomach and blood and bones sticking out and stuff. And they came. They came right through the fire. They didn't have to come. There was nobody behind to make them come. They heard the shooting, they heard me holler, and they came. And they laid down a base of fire on line, 15 men, 2 or 3 to my right, most of them to the left, and the machine gun started firing, and then it seemed like no time at all, and then I realized I wasn't being shot at anymore. All the bullets were coming from our side, going there, and no bullets were coming back. And I said, in a kind of a loud voice, I said, "Shift fire on the left, you guys on the right, assault!" They stood up. They stood up, not knowing what was going to happen to them. They put their rifles on their hips, and they moved through the foliage into the jungle, into that base camp. And the enemy had moved out of the way. We'd called in some artillery, and some airplanes were coming and so forth, and they probably knew what was going to happen to them if they stayed there and tried to fight us. But for me, it was a real lesson in leadership. What I learned is that if you train people and work with people and they respect you, even if they're not like you, even if they didn't grow up the same way, have the same education, have the same hopes, fears, but there's a common humanity, and if you respect that, and you respect them, and you build their respect for you and what you stand for, that you can build a team. And I learned a second lesson from that. I learned that in war, and I think it's true in life, the battles are won at the bottom of the organization. They can be lost at the top, but they're won at the bottom. It was the action of each one of those individual soldiers that saved my life and made us successful in combat that day. It was my problem that I got them there. And I was successful in finding the enemy. I was successful in becoming the first guy shot in the unit. But I'd have remained there if it hadn't been for them. And they're the ones who were the heroes that day. So I took away these two important lessons from the military. There's a lot of other lessons of leadership. You know, if you look at people like Ulysses S. Grant or Napoleon and you ask, how did they do it with their leadership? How did they do it? Yes, they had a great sense of spatial awareness. They had intuition. They had a feel for people. Maybe you could even say they had a little sixth sense about what might happen to them. And if you go to other leaders and read the records of men like Genghis Khan, you'll find that before he went on every campaign, he went to the sacred mountain and he spent 3 or 4 days praying to the deep blue sky because he was seeking something extraordinary that wasn't part of his day-to-day wake up, eat, dress, move existence. He had to reach for another dimension to try to do what he did. And I found myself some 27 years after I was wounded. I was still in the military. I was at that time a general officer, and I'd been told I was going to become the NATO commander. And I was in church, and I was looking at, in the side chapel, I was looking at this picture on the wall of St. Michael. He's the patron saint of warriors. And I remembered that in Vietnam I'd worn a St. Michael's medal. And suddenly I had this strong, deep, powerful intuition. I don't know what to call it, but you just know certain things, and I just knew that somehow it was never supposed to happen, but somehow, for whatever reason, when I got to be the commander at NATO, that I'd be in war. And I was warned by whatever spirituality you want to call it. I had a warning, and 18 months later, we were at war. We fought for 7 weeks. We threatened a ground invasion. We had 36,000 sorties. We dropped 23,000 bombs and missiles. We broke the back of a Serb ethnic cleansing operation to force the Albanian population out of Kosovo. We saved 1.5 million Albanians from ethnic cleansing, and we helped create a new nation in Kosovo. And that only happens. It's the kind of thing that when it happens, you realize you just didn't do that by yourself. That was a lot of people above me, great leaders like Bill Clinton, who saw the vision, a lot of great airmen and soldiers and intelligence people working it, but also there was a sort of a spiritual force about this. This was an idea of stopping ethnic cleansing, an idea whose time had come. And that was the third lesson I took from the military. Respect and teamwork, helping the people at the bottom of the organization win, but also that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And we had that idea rolling across Europe. There'd be no more ethnic cleansing. Democracy would take place. The West would triumph. And that was an idea that was unstoppable. in the hearts and minds of men and women at the time. So I moved then on out of the military and I moved into politics. And I can't say I can tell you the successful lessons of political leadership because, but it was a great experience on the campaign trail. And I met a lot of people. I went to 30 states in 3 months, raised $24 million. We won Oklahoma. We came in second in a bunch of states. And ultimately, it was a real introduction to a broad part of American life that you normally couldn't see. And what I've taken out of it is that of course, in the United States, we have an adversarial system in politics. We don't have a unitary system. We don't have a parliamentary system. We have a system of checks and balances. We have an executive, a legislative branch. We have a legal branch. And in essence, the idea behind this was to prevent the seizure of government by any one group that might try to serve private interests at the expense of public interests. Or as Madison and Hamilton said in the Federalist Papers 51, let ambition counteract ambition and interest group counteract interest group. And that was the theory. And it's worked reasonably well. I'm very proud of American democracy and where it is. People around the world look at it, they might be looking at this Republican primary and saying, oh my God, my God. I mean, there are hoots of derision, howls of laughter, tears of fear, in some of the expressions of the candidates. But this is part of the American experience of articulating what people believe in. We have in America come down to a two-party system, at least today. One party is a party that's been motivated for most of a century by a deep and burning passion to correct injustices. We've fought to correct those injustices. And through the actions of this party, primarily, we've established minimum wages, we've established regular working hours and 5-day work weeks. We built Social Security and Medicare. We're pretty strong on national security. We won the World War II. We have a vision. We put in place a program that put an American on the moon in 9 years. It's a pretty wonderful party. And over a century of achievement, it's done a lot. There's another party, and there has to be in a democratic system. It's a party that stands for entrepreneurship and big business. Primarily, it doesn't like the restraints. It wants maximum freedom for the protection and preservation and growth of private property. And it reflects a certain set of cultural values. And in the American system, we're pushing and fighting and working it out in public and in private, in neighborhoods and churches and on the TV screen and ultimately in the poll booth, year after year. This is the stuff of democracy. And it's like one of my best friends said when I went back to Arkansas after my military career, he says, Wes, you may think this is a messy system, but it is the system in America. It's how the country is governed, and you have to be part of it. And what I learned of it when I ran for office is something I really loved. To go out and reach out to people and hear their stories, to recognize that government can have a positive role in helping men and women achieve their greatest hopes and avoid their deepest fears, and that with the right vision and the right spirit, you could uplift a nation. It's possible. And that's the freedom and the political system we have in America if we can just realize it. The two parties are different. The Democratic Party, motivated by its deep, burning desire for justice, has knocked over one after another the bowling pins of injustice. And I'm very pleased to see the progress that's been made on rights for the GLBT community and the fact that we can now have gays serving in the military. I think it's a huge step forward. But it's an odd thing about the party and the way it works in America is that those who suffered the most, who fought and earned justice for themselves, then after a few years they forget the burning passion of it and they think about preserving what they have. And if they go to preserve what they have, they might go to the other party. because the other party gets its motivation not from a burning passion for correcting injustice, but I would say more from a passion to preserve what it has. And there's a lot of fear out in this political dialogue today. And I think we have to move past that fear in pursuit of a better future. The truth is that we need to move beyond where we are in the political dialogue in America and in the dialogue between states throughout the world. During the Cold War, there really were two competing ideologies. In the new era, there's no dominant superpower. But it could be managed, the problems we face and the challenges we see. It just can't be about winning or conquering or defeating. It can't just be about soldiers. It can't just be about fear. There's got to be a greater vision. And somehow we have to pull together in conferences like this on a global scale. We've got to emphasize what's common among us. We've got to emphasize what we share, what we can together create. We've got to strengthen that which empowers us. We've got to transcend private interests and work to attain the public interest. We've got to get past fear and live hope and a new vision for the future. With the technology we have today, it's possible we can end the politics of scarcity. The question is, do we have the values and the consciousness to take advantage of those opportunities today for the good of all mankind? One of my favorite presidents is Theodore Roosevelt, and what he said is something I've always reflected on and believed in. He said, far and away the greatest prize that life has to offer is the opportunity to work hard at work worth doing. There's a lot of work here worth doing. Deepak, congratulations to you bringing together this great group and this conference. Let's get on with it. Thank you.